The peace treaty concluded in Artres in 1546 ended another Italian war, but Francis I was not satisfied with its results. Francis I did not have time to start another war, as he died on March 31, 1547. The new King of France is the son of Francis I, Henry II, who, like his late father, began to make plans to conquer northern Italy. According to the terms of the peace treaty concluded by Francis I with the English king for the return of Boulogne, which was to take place in 1554, France undertook to pay a huge ransom of 2 million ECU. Fortunately for the new French king, he did not have to pay. The fact is that in January 1547 the English king Henry VIII dies and his 9-year-old son Edward VI becomes the new king. Very soon after the ascension to the throne of Edward VI, relations between Scotland and England deteriorated greatly. Therefore, in 1550, the Regency Council, which ruled instead of the young Edward VI, in order to avoid the need to fight on two fronts, decided to return Boulogne to France free of charge, ahead of the time specified in the peace treaty. The return of Boulogne resolved the differences between England and France, while Henry II had claims to the territories controlled by the Holy Roman Empire. To implement his plans, the French king decided to take advantage of the discontent of the German Protestant princes. In 1551, he promised Moritz of Saxony, who was the informal leader of the German princes who were dissatisfied with Charles V, 240,000 ECU in exchange for the transfer of the cities of Metz, Toul, Verdun and Cambrai to France. After transferring the money to Moritz of Saxony, Henry II, at the head of his army, set out on a campaign. The French army, without meeting any resistance, occupied the cities of Metz, Toul, Verdun and Cambrai, as well as the surrounding territories. At the same time, Moritz of Saxony, at the head of an army of Protestant princes, moved into southern Germany. The rapid attack of the Protestants caught Charles V by surprise, because of which he had to flee from Innsbruck to the city of Villach and begin to raise an army to pacify the Protestant princes. At the same time, the emperor's brother Ferdinand I negotiated with Moritz of Saxony. This time, large-scale bloodshed was avoided, and in 1552 the Treaty of Passau was concluded between the emperor and the Protestants. At this time, Henry II continued his offensive deep into the imperial territories and laid siege to the city of Strasbourg. The siege of the city was unsuccessful, and after several attempts to storm, the French had to lift the siege and return to their territory. Having resolved the conflict with the Protestants on October 20, 1552, Charles V, at the head of an army of 56,000 soldiers, crossed the Rhine and on October 21 laid siege to the city of Metz, which was defended by the French garrison. The siege of the city was unsuccessful for the imperial army, which almost immediately after it began, suffered from disease and lack of food. In this situation, Charles V on January 2, 1553 was forced to lift the siege of the city and retreat to the Netherlands. In July 1552, the Republic of Siena rebelled against the authority of the Emperor of the Holy Empire. In the same month, a French garrison arrived in Siena to protect the rebellious Republic from Charles V. At the same time, the Franco-Ottoman fleet made a raid, plundering the coast of Calabria, and thereby causing serious material damage to Charles V. In January 1553, the Viceroy of Naples, with the support of the Duke of Florence, attacked Siena, which, in addition to local troops, was defended by the French garrison. The attack was unsuccessful and, having suffered a defeat, the imperial and Florentine troops were forced to retreat. In August 1553, a combined Franco-Ottoman fleet landed in Corsica and, in a swift advance, captured most of the island. In autumn, the Franco-Ottoman fleet left the coast of Corsica, leaving a small garrison of 5,000 French soldiers on the island. In 1554, the Duke of Florence, Cosimo Medici, with the support of Charles V, launched a new military campaign against the Republic of Siena. The United Army of the Holy Roman Empire in Florence launched an invasion of the Republic of Siena, the army of which was led by a condottiere who was in the service of the French king, Piero Strozzi. On January 26, the Florentine army under the command of Gian Giacomo Medici reached the outskirts of Siena. The Florentines began to lay siege to the city, despite the fact that they did not have enough forces to completely block Siena. After months of siege, Siena's defenders began to run out of food, so Strozzi withdrew most of his army from the city and launched an attack. He managed to sweep away enemy barriers and knock out the enemy from a number of settlements, after which he deployed his army to return to Siena. On the path of Strozzi's army near the village of Marciano, the combined Imperial Florentine army was located, so he had to start preparing for the battle. Before the start of the battle, Strozzi had at his disposal 1,000 horsemen, 14,000 infantrymen and 5 guns. In turn, the Imperial Florentine army consisted of 17,000 infantrymen and 1,500 horsemen. The Imperials also had artillery, but unfortunately there is no data on the exact number of guns. The left flank of the Imperial army consisted of 1,200 light and 300 heavy horsemen. In the center of the army there were 2,000 Spanish infantrymen and 4,000 lanzknechts. On the right flank were 4,000 Florentine infantry, as well as 2,000 Spanish and 3,000 infantry from Rome. A reserve of 200 Spanish infantry and a company of mounted arquebusiers was also provided. In turn, Strozzi placed 1,000 horsemen on the right flank. In the center of his army were 3,000 lanzknechts, 3,000 Swiss mercenaries and 3,000 French infantrymen. On the left flank there were 5,000 Italian infantrymen. At the very beginning of the battle, a short artillery skirmish ensued. Since both armies possessed a small number of guns, the artillery skirmish turned out to be ineffective. After some time, the Medici sent their cavalry to attack. Thanks to the presence of heavy horsemen and a numerical advantage, the Imperial cavalry overturned the enemy cavalry with a swift blow, which, having suffered serious losses, fled from the battlefield. Having been left without the right flank, Strozzi ordered the lanzknechts to descend the hill and take up positions on the right flank. At this time, the Imperial army reached the enemy positions and entered into hand-to-hand combat. In this battle, the Imperial gunners distinguished themselves, who showed unexpected accuracy. Their shells brought chaos to the ranks of the lanzknechts and Swiss mercenaries, upsetting their battle formation. Lanzknechts and Swiss mercenaries under artillery fire began to back away. At this time, the heavy cavalry of the Imperials returned to the battlefield, which completed the pursuit of the enemy horsemen. Quickly orienting themselves in the current situation, the Imperial horsemen delivered a powerful blow to the rear of the lanzknechts. In turn, the lanzknechts, whose morale was undermined by well-aimed fire from enemy artillery, after the attack of the enemy cavalry, faltered and began to flee. The example of the lanzknechts was followed by Swiss mercenaries and Italian infantry. Only the French infantry continued to fight even when they were surrounded and completely destroyed. The battle lasted only 2 hours, but during this time Strozzi lost 4,000 soldiers killed and 4,000 soldiers wounded. Having won the victory, the Medici continued the siege of Siena, which capitulated on April 17, 1555, after which the Republic of Siena became part of the Duke of Florence. In the spring of 1554, Henry II, at the head of his army, again invaded the territory of the Holy Roman Empire. The advancing French army, having broken the resistance of the local garrisons, ravaged the territories of Artois and Hainaut, after which, together with the looted valuables, they began to retreat to their territory. Near the village of Renty, the French were overtaken by the imperial army under the command of Charles V. In the ensuing battle, the French suffered a crushing defeat and were forced to retreat. By the end of 1554, both Henry II and Charles V began to experience serious financial difficulties, due to which, as a result of lengthy negotiations, the Truce of Versailles was concluded on February 15, 1556, under the terms of which hostilities ceased, and the parties left behind the occupied territories. Shortly before the signing of the armistice, Charles V transferred all his possessions to his son Philip, temporarily reserving only the title of Emperor of the Holy Roman Empire, which in 1558 passed to his brother Ferdinand. This war could have ended if not for Pope Paul IV, who hated the Emperor of the Holy Roman Empire and wanted to continue the Italian War. The Pope's men managed to convince the French king to continue the fight for control of Italy. On January 9, 1557, the French army under the command of Francois de Guise set out from Turin. Already on January 20, the French stormed the city of Valenza and began to move towards Naples. On April 20, 1557, the French army encamped near the fortress of Civitella and was forced to stop. The fact is that the mercenaries refused to go further until they were paid their salaries. While the issue of salary was being resolved, the French began the siege of Civitella. At this time, the numerically superior Spanish army approached the positions of the French. De Guise had to take up the defensive, but the commander of the Spanish army, despite the overwhelming numerical advantage, did not dare to launch an attack. At the end of May, De Guise received an order from the king to stop the Neapolitan campaign and return to Lombardy with the army. At this time, the combined Anglo-Spanish army invaded France and laid siege to the city of Saint-Quentin. The French army advanced to help the defenders of the city. Not daring to engage in battle with a numerically superior enemy, the French tried to enter the city through the swamp but were attacked by the combined army of the Spaniards and the Englishry. The battle took place on August 10, 1557. The French army was completely defeated. Spanish troops in Italy took advantage of the retreat of French troops into Lombardy and occupied the Papal State. In this situation, the Pope was forced to abandon the alliance with the French and promised to remain neutral until the end of hostilities. Since the French lost a significant part of their army in the Battle of Saint-Quentin, Henry II feared that in the event of a joint attack by the Spaniards and the Englishry on Paris, he would not be able to defend the city. So he decided to take action. Waiting for the return of De Guise's army from Italy, he ordered him to attack the English expeditionary force at Calais in order to prevent him from uniting with the Spaniards. On January 1, 1558, De Guise reached the outskirts of Calais and attacked the city. The French attack was a complete surprise for the Englishry, and already on January 7 they capitulated. Encouraged by the success of his army at Calais, Henry II decided to attack the Imperials. On April 17, the French army reached the outskirts of the city of Thionville. Despite the fierce resistance of the local garrison, after a long siege on June 23, 1558, the city fell into the hands of the French. At the same time, the Second French army left Calais and advanced to the seaside Flanders. The French plundered all the cities and villages that came across on their way until July 13, 1558, near the village of Gravelines, they encountered a combined Anglo-Spanish army. In the ensuing battle, the French army was defeated, and its remnants hastily retreated to Calais. By the end of 1558, Spain and France simply had no money left to continue the fighting, so it was decided to start negotiations. On April 2, 1559, the Treaty of Cateau-Cambrésis was concluded, under the terms of which France returned to Spain the previously captured territories, except for the cities of Metz, Toul and Verdun, and also withdrew troops from the Savoy Duchy. In addition, Henry II pledged to return Corsica to the Republic of Genoa. Calais remained under the rule of the French king in exchange for a promise to pay 500,000 crowns to the British. The Italian Wars ended with the establishment of Habsburg hegemony in Europe. If you like this video, be sure to subscribe to my channel and click on the bell.